Well, so I thought actually what's interesting is you were the 5th or 6th employee at FloQast.
I don't even keep track. I think I was the 6th, 5th longest tenured now.
Okay.
Counting the founders.
Okay. Yeah. I always think it's interesting that they do count the founders on that roster. I was like, well, you're the third person hired or second person?
Third person hired.
Third person hired. Is that including Cullen then?
Not including
Not
Cullen.
including Cullen. Sorry.
One engineer, one account executive.
Okay. That's pretty cool. And then how into like sports were they early on? Or were you guys like, was it like more like a frat starting out?
I joined FloQast when I was in my early 20s. And I have to say, I was far less mature at that point. And I think Mike, Chris, and Cullen were similar in their life journeys. So we had a lot that we had in common and talked about in terms of sports and other things that we were doing life-wise. I used to lay out back of the house during lunch and catch some rays and tan a little bit, shirt off. So those are the types of things that you can't do once you grow as a company.
Yeah.
Actually have other employees in the building, things like that. So
I one time got in trouble for showing up. I was an intern and I got in trouble for showing up to a client. I was like wearing like my undershirt still, like throwing it on. I don't know what was going through my head, but at 19 years old, I was like, there's no rules. And I just was walking into the client building. And I remember one of the senior managers pulled me aside and he's like, you can't, this is like $1 million client. You can't just show up here like in an undershirt, like putting your shirt on as you're coming.
Yeah, there was a lot of growing up that we did. It helped maybe that our office was the formerly a weed dispensary in LA. So it kind of had that type of vibe of people coming in and still knocking on our door asking for weed, which we had to put signs up and things like that. But we were casual. We've definitely grown up over the last 10 years individually and as a company.
How do you get the experience to, especially at such a young age, starting at a company at, how old were you, 23 or?
Yeah, I think I was 24, 25.
Yeah. And so other than the experience that you had from working in public, like since then, do you use mentors as sort of like, how do you get your guiding force for you progressing through your career?
Yeah, even at that point, I knew that I wanted to get out of public accounting. I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do next. I was working at Deloitte in San Francisco, so I had a lot of tech influence around me. Sure. And I had a lot of friends who were working in tech sales. So I went to ask all them, what life was like, how they felt working each day, the challenges, things that they were building on. And I did that with a ton of different professions to say, I want to be in tech sales. So even at that point, and then as I jumped into it, I used those people, friends, peers who were doing it to learn from. I had a great first account executive to learn from who had more experience as well. So he and I just kind of hit the ground running. And then in each step over the years, managing the account executive team, overseeing US sales for a period of time, starting the office in Europe and overseeing those teams. Each one of those journeys has a different kind of chapter to it and a different mentor or voice that's worth listening to. So each time I had a different role, I would listen to other voices and try to seek out that help.
Sure. I feel like people often lack having a mentor, and that's, I think, such a crucial role of having somebody that you can lean on and look up to. I think Mike had that with Rob, still does, right? And so that's definitely like a huge stepping stone and growth part of your career journey and just overall personal development.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I've had a distinct one mentor either, but they've all come from different voices around that people are really kind to offer their time. And I think through Rob as one of our investors, through Gary Swart as one of our investors, those are guys that have great sales and marketing careers that have offered their time to me or their contacts to be in touch with, which
Very
has been
cool. Cool. Well, with that being said, let's get flowing.
You are now entering FinTech Flo.
So for first-time listeners, or it's also your first time, anybody who's unfamiliar, I'm Drew Carrick, known by some as the Rapping CPA, producer at FloQast Studios, and host of the FinTech Flo. And I have a special guest today.
Adam Zoucha. I'm the SVP of International Sales at FloQast. Been with the company for 10 years since we went to market. So happy to be doing this today.
Sweet. And how many years were you in the UK for?
I was in the UK, have been in the UK for the last 3.5 years. So moved over April 2021. I moved at a very fortunate time, a day before outdoor dining opened up post-COVID in London. So it's great to be able to move over there and actually go out and enjoy some things.
And was the plan to open UK already in process like when COVID had started and it was just like, well, we're just going through with it, so timing just got lucked out, or was that like a post-COVID decision?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. Before our board meeting was in February of 2020, and I had laid out this whole plan for our European expansion. Went to the board meeting, got it approved. We were effectively heading to London and opening up Europe. Then COVID comes March 2020 in full effect, and we just put a full pause at that time. So I'd done all this pre-work, research, everything, got everything set up as to how we were going to do it. It was accepted, said, yes, we're going to invest in it. Boom, press pause. Let's see what this COVID thing's about for the next months. We realized that the business, took off in COVID with the need for, digital transformation and bringing all our accounting and finance teams to a central hub, being so dispersed. So then we picked it up again in September of 2020. And at that point, the plan was already formulated. Business is going really strong right now. Let's pick up that plan and go for it.
Oh, cool. So yeah, timing worked out perfectly then, kind of. But so we're going to do a little breakdown of the recent industry news in a section called the FinTech 411. Then we'll play a little game of bullish or bearish, where we pick a topic and make an opinionated prediction about it. Then we'll head on over to the business philosophy section, get some thought leadership insights that people actually want to know about. And we'll wrap things up with a laugh in looking at a recent meme that is just culturally relevant and, see how it applies to folks in the industry and, where it really came from. So as per tradition, I've been kicking these things off with a joke. So here's my relevant one for the episode. Why did the sales director set sail to work overseas?
Very relevant. Why?
Because he thought overseeing the sales team meant he needed to literally sail over the sea. We knew that there would be some sort of sales and overseas, and you're overseeing the overseas sales. So
we're smarter than that, though, sales directors.
Yes.
We know.
Yes. All right. So first article we've got going on here. This is from Entrepreneur. These types of people are the secret superheroes that your business needs. And the article states that there's a measurable correlation between creativity and exceptional business performance. Creative entrepreneurs blend the best of both worlds, creativity and business, offering a unique dual approach that could be key to innovation and growth. So obviously, 3 years that you're out there, you successfully built out an office and a team from scratch. So, and you also mentioned this earlier of like coming up with this plan. I mean, there's so many parts of this that I want to understand of like from what were you first eyeing from building that plan, and then when you actually got out there, what it took to execute that plan, to like hire the right people to build this office from scratch.
Yeah. The first things we were looking at plan-wise were first, where's the right place for us to start? And having the accounting DNA that FloQast does, we really zeroed in on where are the most accountants? Where can we pull from talent-wise? And the Big Four has such a strong presence in London. It's such a vibrant business culture in London that's where we really focused or narrowed our focus to. So we started with that and then built out the go-to-market plan largely off of how we went to market in the US and where we went wrong. So I had the hindsight to be able to say, I've done this before when we had 0 clients just starting out in the US. I saw where we went wrong, where we focused, where we shouldn't have, the types of folks that we targeted, where it made sense for the right type of customer and the right type of value to be had. So knowing all that, it was formulating the plan and then going out and executing. And the types of people that we looked for when originally building the team, we always kind of stayed true to that DNA, of course, with our accounting backgrounds. And first folks that we hired were former auditors as well, in and around London. But you need a special type of person, right? It's someone who's taking a chance on something that's never been done or sold in that area. So you need someone who's open-minded, someone who's a little gritty, to use an American football term, and willing to be okay with constant change. And the biggest thing I also look for, and you always look for in a small office, can you get along with people? Are they going to adapt to what your suggestions are? I, as leader, an American leader going over there, need to be open to, I don't know, how to best do things.
Right.
And we need to listen to our customers. We need to listen to what the market's telling us to be able to adapt. So having that type of mentality with your early hires is essential, because I'm listening to what they're suggesting and what they're hearing. I'm offering my advice based off what I've seen in the past, and we're making an informed decision together.
So did you have any help from like European recruiters for this, or was it all you, or did we use our American recruiting team? Because obviously, like you said, there's a cultural difference that you'll have to address, and maybe it's more similar with UK and the US, but obviously you expand to other parts of the world and other parts of Europe, it starts to get even more unique and niched into the culture that they have. So how did you actually approach that hiring process?
We did have, and we still do have recruiting help from an agency called Strawlin. And we got in touch with them originally through, I believe, the Mayor of London's office. So the Mayor of London's office is invested in having American companies, invest in London and set up their European operations. So they'll kind of give you a lot of information as to why London's the best place to be your hub, get you started, and introduce you to some vendors and things like that. So this was one of those people, I believe.
Is there other cities in the UK that are vying for that? You know how in the US, like, Austin or, Atlanta's making a push to get film to come to it. And that's a whole big thing of late. And, Austin's saying that they're a business hub and you should come and do business here. Is there a similar city that's trying to make a push besides London? Because obviously everybody in the world knows London. I don't know if there was any other like offshoots.
There's a few, you'll see a lot of great businesses in Edinburgh as an example, or Manchester. But for us, London was always the answer. It was more so, if we do the UK, we're doing London. If not, are we doing Dublin or are we doing Amsterdam? And those have been kind of the recent real deciding cities at that time anyway.
Yeah. So when you were setting up that office, what was the initial like roster hiring plan supposed to look like? Because obviously you have all these different components you need. Was it just like, I just going to start with one person, or were you going for a few different functions trying to say, we have to fill all 5 of these kind of at the same time to get this thing started?
Yeah, great question. This comes back to kind of the original formulated plan as well that was presented to the board. And this was a part of that plan that was approved. And the idea was to bring over key pieces from headquarters of each of the customer lifecycle places. So, BDR, AE, implementation, customer success, all of those key roles, we wanted to have a leader or someone who had experience with FloQast come over to London and then build a team from there. And, ultimately, if those people are going to come back to the States, groom a leader and get things started. So we had that plan. I went knocking on doors here at headquarters to find the best people for each of those roles. I was able to recruit the longest tenured marketer that we had in the company, the top selling person, the longest tenured customer success person, a great implementation person, and a BDR leader. So all those people, I'm biased, but they were the best, best in the company at each of their roles, and were willing and excited to come out to London. some took more convincing than others.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if there was certain like convincing, because I'm the type of person that loves traveling, right? So any opportunity, some people hate, I got to go to that conference. Like I don't want to go to Cleveland to go to a conference or whatever. And I'm like, you can sign me up. I'll go to the conference anytime somebody needs me to go to a conference. I'll fly wherever I got to go. Was there any particular recruiting tactic that was like the big selling point for why they would want to do this?
There was really only one person who was most tentative about it, and that's Nico, who's our director of sales now in EMEA, and he was the top account executive in the States, and I wanted him to come over and be an account executive with a path to promotion and start to build out the team there, which he's now done, and it's been a great opportunity for him. But it was just, kind of guiding him along as to why this opportunity is such a big one for you career-wise and what you can build with it. And to his credit, now that once he did jump on board, he has done that now, has ascended to a director of sales, runs effectively the whole direct sales team there and has done a fantastic job with it. But he'd be the first to tell you, took a lot of extra convincing.
That's awesome. But the opportunity that you have to build something, because a lot of people come in, later stage, and obviously, your whole career is built on, getting in at that early stage, and that's how you're able to see the entire growth cycle of a company, from being able to tan in the backyard with your shirt off to now having like a packed office with a few hundred people and very strict compliance rules that we have to follow by, badging in, badging out, careful of what we put on camera, all that stuff.
Of course, yeah. There's as I kind of mentioned in the intro, there's a lot of growing up that happened over the years. So I'm conscious with each of the roles that I take on and the leaders that I bring on. I'm clear that you have a responsibility, and I have a responsibility to the group that I'm with, and that's first and foremost that I want FloQast to be the best mark on their resume, career-wise. So as they're looking, to the next thing, maybe not everyone's going to be at FloQast forever. That this was a huge stamp on their resume to allow them to get that next career move that they want.
Sure.
And in that responsibility, I also know certain things that I can and can't do anymore, and expect that of the leaders as well.
So up to this point, we're pushing like 800 people, right? If you're to look over the course of this tenure, and perhaps you need to spend a little more time in the States to kind of refamiliarize with the scale of the office that we have here, because it's obviously grown a lot since you took on the England office. What 50-person or what growth stage do you think has been the biggest pivot and shift so far? Because I was number 300, and so I've seen quite a shift from what the 300-person team looks like to the 750-person team looks like. You were there when it's a 5-person team going to a 10, or a 10 to a 50, or a 50 to 100. If you were to just kind of pick, agnostically, which of those sections was the most, have you seen the biggest shift of like evolution of a company?
I think the biggest shift is right now, because it's conscious. And I say that because early on, you're just trying to figure out if you have something. And that's a lot, can we get customers? Are they interested? Can we retain those customers? Can we build what they're asking for? All those types of things. You're kind of just flying by the seat of your pants, like taking one thing at a time and then just going and going and going. And back to the creativity piece, it can be difficult sometimes to have the time to take a step back when you're moving so fast, having so many meetings, being on so many calls, to still be creative. So that's a challenge for me, which we can get into throughout all the years. But right now, in terms of a conscious kind of transformation, where we're going FloQast as a evolving platform, how much we offer in terms of product and value to our customers, and all the pieces internally, different teams that touch our customer lifecycle, is a major shift. And I think we're growing up in a major way that's really valuable to our customers right now, and they're recognizing it as well.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, because you're in that early growth stage where you're just trying to get your footing and figure out, what the length of it is. And once you kind of hit that, like, no, we're established. This is like, you could turn off growth mode and just be in a totally like regular profitable situation. and just kind of cruise. So now it's really in how can you innovate, how can you be creative, how can you, as a mature company, find ways to get outside the box. And people getting hired now, I think, is like kind of interesting. They're just joining like an enterprise company. It's not like we said like startup for a while, but it's like technically we're not qualified as a startup anymore. And it's a weird thing, I think, to think about, especially early on, where you've always viewed yourself as like working for a startup. It's not really a startup. It's a full on company.
Yeah, that's right. And people might be best suited for different stages of a company. Hopefully, the people we're bringing on now are the ones suited to be at an enterprise company and take an enterprise company to the next level. But we were talking about those early hires. In London, early hires we made here at headquarters. Not always that same mentality that you have as an early hire leads to you thriving and being the right employee in an enterprise company. It just depends on the person. Definitely those people can grow and adapt to what's needed as the level that we're at now. And we have tens, 20s of people who have been here since the early days that are still here, have adapted and are growing. But it is interesting that some may say that this isn't for me. As a company gets this big, they want to grow or build something from a really small stage. I have told Mike and the other leadership team, I feel like I cheated the system a little bit because I love that piece of building businesses, and I've gotten to do it now twice within a larger organization. So I got that building a FloQast from the start. Now I got the building in Europe, and I got to do it all over again. Yet I still had the financial backing and support of a larger organization that made it less risky.
Yeah, I think that was for me the biggest selling point, because I have that accountant, risk averse nature in me, but also still the desire to go do and build and explore and create. And I think like the development and the building of the studio department, for example, was like one of those where it's like I get to play YouTuber kind of, but within the context of this larger, very stable financial entity. And apply the accounting and business knowledge and finance background that I do have, but doing it in a much funner way. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I love it. That's a big difference than how we hired initially, right? Those first hires that we made in Europe or in the US, we took accountants like you and I, who are risk adverse, and said, take a chance on us. That's not the easiest thing to do. The amount of times that I had to chat with people, extra steps in an interview process to tell them, I promise you, your audit team will be okay. Yeah. Like they tell you that, you are essential as the staff auditor to this client, but they'll be okay. They'll be able to fill your spot. You have to have a lot of those conversations early on, but as FloQast matures, has now grown into an enterprise like company, you have that safety.
Yeah. I think there's been a lot of great perspectives here for employees who are looking at career development to figure out what they should be considering, and then also from a leadership standpoint, the hiring process and what that looks like. So a few other keynote takeaways from this article was just, combining creativity and entrepreneurship, like we talked about, is emerging as a powerful driver for innovation and business growth, and that's been validated by studies. So the creativity and the entrepreneurship, pulling that in, even at a large company when you're at a 750 enterprise level, people who have that drive will help push you and keep you going. So it's almost the scrappy startup people, but the less scrappy, the more polished startup people. Yeah. Creative entrepreneurs bridging the gap between visionary ideas and practical business execution. They're invaluable for fostering empathy, efficiency, and improved collaboration amongst companies. And I see that being how you can get to play that game of building within a larger organization. And that's what the larger organizations, on the flip side, need in order to keep growing and innovating. Otherwise, you become one of those large companies that just gradually has a slow exodus and slow death because you've just stopped innovating, you've stopped iterating, and you don't have people who are you can put into a pocket and say, you're going to build this new department, you're going to build this new division, this new product, whatever it is. And it gives you that exciting chance to go, start from scratch again.
Yeah, I was going to say, it works the same way product wise. We're innovating now more than ever, but we have, effectively entrepreneurship groups within the large organization of the FloQast product that are building and innovating, new product that's exciting, more exciting than ever. but they're doing it within that larger organization, which is necessary.
Yeah, and getting to play entrepreneur is an entrepreneur's dream.
Yeah.
Is embedded creative talent in leadership roles is not just beneficial, but necessary for organizations aiming to excel in today's competitive marketplace. So yeah, it just goes to show that, being able to think a little bit differently. And you always are going to need, this is my big sticking point I always talk about, you're always going to need the three types of employees. You're going to need the technicians, the people who are boots on the ground, who are executing the plan, who are making the actual moves to drive the needle. You're going to need the managers, the people that can oversee the projects, make sure everything is flowing, make sure the teams are collaborating effectively, ensure that the whole entire thing is getting done. And then you're going to need the sort of entrepreneurs, the creative visionary innovators, as I call, which are the ones who are, it's a lot more strategy oriented, a lot more hypothetical. You're not really directly immediately seeing it, but it's the things that are going to differentiate you. And that's what drives the plan that the managers then oversee the execution of, that the technicians then execute. So I think there's a value to all of those, and definitely having some of that creativity and array of all three of those embedded in the management level helps drive the business forward.
Absolutely. And there's a piece that you mentioned, the article says there in terms of competition as well. People shy away from competition. Often I don't think we do here at FloQast. Competition drives innovation. There are things of competitors or just tangential software players in the space are doing that you say, okay, that's a different way of thinking about things. Maybe we should think in that realm, or take that idea and build off it in our own way. So that type of innovation drive is good for our customers and is good for the market altogether.
Yeah, 100%. That's Mike's favorite thing is capitalism, and thrives on competition. So bring me over to the next one, talking about the competition in the workplace. Shein is, for those who don't know, of course, the clothing brand. They're making everything, I feel like. They are, they're also international business, and they were looking at a London IPO, and this is an article from Retail Insight Network. It was just an explainer. The key to Shein's IPO success is planning and adaptability. So it seems that compliance is a major aspect of this, and there's also those two parts. There's one is there a different dogma behind, or stigma behind, the London IPO versus the New York IPO? Are they tight about that in London? Or
I think it's who you ask.
Yeah.
There are listing in the U.S. exchanges are going to be right for some companies. Listing on the London Stock Exchange or some of the other European exchanges are going to be right for those companies. So I like to think of it as more of an individual company decision as to what's right, and I can't make that decision. Sure. Not being internal there. I've tons of contacts and friends who kind of work in the banking world in London now, dealing with just those IPOs and transactions. They're just as intense, and if not more, than some of the ones that go on in the States or other parts of Europe. So I think the point of the article is that governance and compliance is such a hot topic, and something that needs to be thought of far in advance. And these departments, not only finance, but as a whole company, you need to think about, am I compliant in each of the key areas to take my company public?
Yeah.
And FloQast obviously is a solution that helps companies become compliant, but there's others in other areas too that are needed.
Is there a certain point along the company's journey when they need to start that planning process? I imagine when it's 10 guys at a frat house that used to be a weed dispensary, and they're hanging out, having some beers in the backyard, you're not really thinking compliance at that point too hardcore. Well, maybe you are as a tech company, because you're dealing with financial data. But in general, most startups, is there a certain point, do you think, where it's like, if you were at least outreaching from this is when it's time for you to probably utilize FloQast, for example, or any compliant solution? At what point in their journey is kind of that time to start planning?
Yeah, looking at the underlying metrics of what puts you in that qualification zone to go public on whichever exchange you're trying to. If I work from what those metrics need to be, I would be 2 years before that point. So really looking at a 2-year mark to get all of those types of things in place. And Josh, our president of FloQast, always talks about, you don't want to be the department or part of the company that's holding the rest of the company back from being able to list if that's the right move for the company. So that's the approach that we take from a revenue perspective, making sure that we're hitting internal guidance so that we can hit external guidance when it's time and is ready. So you want to make all of those steps and be in place so that you're not that department holding the company back.
Yeah, I could only imagine it's like coming down to the wire and you're like, we're a week out and we got to get everything together and we're not used to doing it. But to your point, if you're already ready when you start to think about having that conversation of should we go public, do we want to, you're already doing the stuff you need to do. So that's not a factor. It's all just based on market conditions and when you think is going to be the ideal time and how can you build up the brand name as much as you can ahead of that IPO.
Yeah, if everyone's saying we want to go, it's the best thing for the company and we're ready to go, and you're the one person that says, sorry, we can't go, that's going to be a shitty feeling.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. So also from a market entry standpoint, would you say the aura is that are UK companies as interested in spreading to the US as like US companies are interested in spreading, overseas?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The US market is just so big, and if you're able to capture that business, it's going to be huge for your business. The difference, or some of the differences that I've found selling to US based companies and European is, from a general sense, I'd say European buyers are more prudent in how they think about software and when they need it. For better or for worse, you have that American mentality that you can be an entrepreneur, you can grow your business as big as it'll take you. You're going to be the next unicorn. You're going to go public one day. And if I look at some of these companies, in the face, you're a 5 to 10 person company. Like it's great to have ambitions, but let's take it one step at a time. And a lot of companies will put software in place in the States a lot earlier because they have those grand ambitions. They see themselves getting there, and a lot of them do, to their credit. I'd say in Europe, you're going to get further along as a company before you maybe make some of these investments in certain areas. And as a result, I think we found that our entry point, company size-wise, was a little bit larger in the UK and in Europe than in the States.
That makes sense. And those probably then result in better long-term clients because they are more diligent and slowly thinking through. And I mean, by better, I mean like they're going to last, right? And if I think about how many times, I wonder if this also applies to individuals in the UK as general, if they were buying for themselves, because when you're buying on behalf of a company in the B2B world, it's a little different than, of course, the the B2C world. But I feel like people all the time subscribe to something and then they never actually use it.
Yeah.
And then they got it because they were planning, no, I'm going to learn video editing, and they get all the programs. I'm going to learn how to mix music, and they get all the programs. Next thing you spend thousands of dollars on equipment and software, and then you never open the thing. And then eventually it comes around. And eventually, really, what happens is probably your credit card expires, and then you're like, oh, I didn't even realize I've been paying for that this whole entire time, and then you don't re-up it.
Yep.
But I wonder if somebody is going to be very diligent about it and the product is working, then when they do make that purchase, it's a conscious decision. There's a plan in place to use it for the long haul.
I think that's correct. Yeah. And it can be much more of a strategic initiative. And I'm generalizing a lot here, but I think we do face some of those problems with companies that we talk to all over the world as to, is this the right time to buy? And I think we do a good job on our side of not forcing people to buy the system as well. Obviously, everyone making their own decisions, but we can do a good job of leading them down a path to realize when is the right time for them to purchase a system like FloQast or others in the finance space. If you shepherd them through the right sales process, they should make that decision for themselves, but you should also guide them to that decision in the right way, so that they are a long-term customer thinking strategically, and it is the right time for them to put a system in place.
Very cool. We love that. And the final piece I have here is from the Wall Street Journal. That's German recession fears mount as the industry slump endures. This one, I just want to kind of keep it high level, right? There's always these risks of recessions that we've faced. I feel like it's circulated amongst the U.S., it's circulated throughout the globe. How, just from your standpoint of actually being there and amongst folks overseas, is the level of recession fears the same? Are we all kind of just in the same boat here, or is it? Have you noticed or felt any sort of drastic difference in the mentality, like the aura of the people? I don't know if you've heard about this, but a lot of people in the U.S. call this like we're in a vibe session right now, where it's like the economy is literally just based off of vibes, and so you could have stats that say, oh, jobs, there's a lot of job opportunity and there's a lot of growth and people are earning a lot more money. But the vibe is like, yeah, but it's also really expensive to go out and it's really expensive to pay rent or really expensive to have a mortgage. And so do they have as much of a vibe economy over there?
Oh, I haven't heard this vibe economy.
Yeah.
We need a cheap vibes officer
I will be the cheap vibe officer.
Yeah,
for sure.
keeps everything vibes high, and then the economy will be fine.
Yeah.
It sounds like. I think it's similar. There's been this lingering feeling of recession. The market's definitely down. It's not something that's booming and everyone feels positive about. But I feel like much like the States, that people are trudging forward. There's this mentality of let's keep our heads down, let's do what's right, let's do good business, and we'll come out on the other side as the market rebounds and things will get back into place the right way. So I feel like that's a similar type of mentality, and maybe the vibe is perseverance.
Sure. Is there any difference? Because from the London office, do you guys sell to German companies from there as well?
We have 50 employees now throughout Europe,
Okay.
And we have German employees that are in London as well as in Germany.
And so is that a totally different approach? Because I know I heard like the Germans are a lot more like straightforward type people, like they don't sugarcoat stuff as much. Is that factored in as part of the sales cycle and the approach to the business there?
Yeah, there's nuances to kind of every country and region. I think one of the things in Germany in particular is trust. You really need to build the right trust with these buyers, these CFOs, these group financial controllers that we're selling to. Part of that's done directly by proving it to them if they take a chance on us. But it's a chicken and egg thing of are they going to really take a chance? So having trusted advisors like partners in PwC in Germany and CFGI/PAS in Germany and others, they trust them. They've done work with them for years. Those guys have vetted FloQast and know how great and valuable we can be. So that kind of marriage helps to build that trust, and then you just got to slowly build it over time. There's a lot of factors, but that trust one's the biggest.
That makes sense. So other key points just from this article is just, the recession risks are the energy crisis related. It's a manufacturing decline and, the automobile industry in particular. There's also a lot of global competition, and we talk about, Chinese market coming in, and China subsidizes a lot of the businesses. And so there is this overall risk. They're doing a lot of expansion in that standpoint. So it is interesting. And to your point about the nuances of each country, I also think about like even in the United States, each state's kind of its own country. And it would make sense to have even sales teams here where, they're being positioned for the region that they're familiar with. And I've lived in a few different states, and each city has its own. New York, New Orleans, and Los Angeles have three totally different cultures.
Oh, yeah.
And the vibe of the people there and like what they're receptive to and how you approach them is different in all of them. And I think having people that it's not just, oh, I'm familiar with it, but immersing yourself in it. And that's why I think, living in Europe helps you gain that understanding beyond what anybody can just read from a textbook.
Yeah, that's there's a reason sales territories are built out geographically, and that's one of the big ones is you get to understand that culture of what is just New York like, and selling. You get accustomed to selling to that. In Europe's just that on steroids. It's a totally different thing going from one country to the next, yet they're an hour flight away from each other. So being able to cover them time zone wise is possible, of course, but you have to think, do you have the right resources that are going to fit with that culture and be able to adapt as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that kind of is a good segue into our bullish or bearish here, because my question is, are the valuations too damn high? And by valuations, I'm talking about the valuations of football teams, because this is something they're considering, right? They're looking at the potential revenue options. And when you think about how much it has just in the US, is that potential, and we talked about this at the very beginning of the show, is that potential, going to exist overseas? So as of 2023, just some stats here for everybody who's listening. These are record high valuations. We're starting to get PE is interested in getting involved into these teams because of the valuation potential. And, the bull or bearish question there is that positive or is it problematic? You can only imagine when a PE firm comes in to evaluate the team and they're like, all right, we need to really get this offensive line going. Otherwise, we're going to have to start making, do we really need that uniform, or we could probably reduce? We don't need the special uniforms,
Let's put the ads on the helmets. Let's put the ads on the jerseys.
So as of 2023, the average NFL team valuation was around $4.47 billion, and that's only gone up. And the Cowboys currently are at $11 billion. They're the highest. Then you got the Rams at $8 billion. Patriots, Giants, and Raiders, Las Vegas, all in the upper $7 billions.
Go Rams.
Cowboys are the most valuable sports franchise in the world at that $11 billion valuation, and most of their revenue is media deals and ticket sales, sponsorships, merchandise. The benefits, of course, is you can invest in talent, right? Because you have this big valuation is attractive to investors. And then the globalization is what I kind of wanted to talk about is there going to be that potential to exercise that growth? I mean, Germany is one of the places that they have the games going. What do you think as far as like the ability to actually expand internationally?
It's interesting. Roger Goodell and his army of analysts have probably done the research and would know better than me, and that's why they're doing it. I would make the argument that you're not building fandom, new fans just by being there. Like, I don't think by having the Eagles and Packers play in Brazil, this last week, that they've created tens of thousands of new NFL fans. Sure. I think it starts more kind of grassroots than that. And I think there's programs that they're creating in each of, in Germany and the UK, of kind of the international NFL program or whatever it is, where they're having kids and youth programs play American football earlier in life. They're teaching them the rules. They're giving them the opportunities to play in leagues and then come try out in the NFL if you're, a good enough athlete. One of the examples is my office is going to kill me for not knowing this guy's name. We have a Welsh guy in the office that loves this Welsh rugby player who's tried out with the Chiefs this year. He's a young guy, early 20s, rugby star in Wales, which rugby's massive in Wales. And he, started to train for the NFL, came over, was in the Chiefs camp, and I think maybe he made their practice squad or something like that. But those opportunities are coming a lot more now. And I think if you build those types of opportunities for international people, that type of buzz and awareness then kind of spreads to the masses. Yeah,
I'd be curious if they're going to do the IFL, right? If it's going to be the International Football League, because that's, if you think about international expansion, when it comes to European football or soccer, we're talking about every country having their own league. Now, I guess it's all governed by FIFA, perhaps, so maybe there is some sort of centralization. But if I'm Roger Goodell, I'm thinking, well, it's not just a matter of. I think what they are doing is, of course, it is getting eyeballs in these countries onto football. It's getting them experience it. Maybe there's excitement. There is the inspiration, like you said, to build out that grassroots movement. But then the question is, are they going to be able to create, are they going to instill teams and they're going to have leagues that they're running and operating out of these other countries? Will there be at some point a European football league where all the countries just have like a couple teams that, the same way they do like a Euro Cup or something, and they all play with each other, and then eventually it's like world, the Little League World Series, where the best from the U.S. and the best from Europe go play each other. I mean, South America, they're kind of doing it as well. So it is going to be interesting, I think, to see, and this is at the largest of scales of international expansion, if the NFL becomes like the league of all of the other countries as well, where they're actually expanding into those markets versus just inspiring more people to get into football, which creates more fans internationally, of course. But if another league pops up and becomes the league of that region, I would be curious to think if that's a risk or if there's a way that they're getting in front of that where they're like, no, we're going to own that league that gets set up.
I would think they'd actually be happy if that happens. Of course, they want to control, and from what I hear about Roger Goodell, he's a big control freak. But like they would want to control that. But if they're built enough popularity for there to be a league like that in Europe, I think that they would view that as a good thing to grow popularity for the sport and eyes on the NFL and everything like that. London, has always been talked about as like the first one that there would be. I'm a Rams fan, but my AFC team is the London Jags because the Jaguars are an adopted London team. They play there every single year, at least once a year. So I think if it ever happens in terms of having an international team, it will be in London first. But they talk about all the difficulties of scheduling and getting out there. So for that reason, I just find it hard to believe like the XFL, right, and the AFL and all these other leagues that are trying to pop up in the most popular region of America, those can't even survive and get enough traction.
Sure.
Maybe they're just going after the wrong audience. And maybe they need to capture a new audience internationally. I
mean, it would be interesting. Would I adopt a European team the same way that most Americans adopt a European soccer club? My brother's a big Manchester United fan, and I'm wondering if we would adopt different cities of your American football teams that were playing American football in Europe, which would be kind of interesting. Because and then I mean, if they had played in the off season or the opposite of the US, then we would have football all year round.
Yeah,
I mean, they're already Thursday games, Friday games, Sunday games. Next thing you know, you could do Saturday, they can do Tuesday, and you could have the whole week consumed by football, which is I'm not opposed to it, to be honest.
Yeah, I love it. My wife's getting a rude awakening when we're in the States, watching football all day long when it's on, because you can't do it when you're in London. On the flip side, now once I adopted Arsenal in English Premier League, she's like, why are we watching this now all day long? So she can't escape it. But it's super interesting. I don't know where they're going to go with it, but your analogy or that comparison is a great one, because I think that one of the things I would ask is, like, your brother, who's a Manchester United supporter, does he also support an MLS team? Like, is he now into the MLS? And if you took that population of Americans who love English Premier League and you ask them how into MLS or do they have a team in the MLS is, that's almost your equivalent of once you build that group in Europe who all has an NFL team, if you had a local team, would they actually care? Would they actually adopt it?
I guess you're right. So then NFL is positioned where they're going to be fans of the NFL teams no matter what, because I mean, hockey is obviously unique with Canada. They're big into hockey, but still I feel like, the National Hockey League, the NHL that's the teams you root for. The NBA, every country has, these sports, but if you watch the games, it's not like they're packing out the house with people to watch these things. So that is a really good point, is where even if they did get there, they would still have that like team in the US they follow. And if you can build some hyper NFL fans of these teams over in Europe, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you talk about Roger Goodell actually being very, hands-on and being, a control freak, which brings me to this final piece here, which is on business philosophy. And this debate has been raging over the course of LinkedIn over the last, couple weeks. Silicon Valley is going crazy over hashtag founder mode, with some pointing, it's a point of contention, and it's this hands-on leadership style versus this business school top-down management leadership style. And so founder mode is what they're calling it. And the leaders of that are considered like Steve Jobs, Airbnb's Brian Chesky, NVIDIA's Jensen Huang, and OpenAI's Sam Altman. Skeptics of founder mode, though, say that a lot of the visionary CEOs have a management-oriented number two, kind of like what Jobs had in Tim Cook, and others have floated a less nuanced critique, arguing that founder mode is just a term for micromanagement, and they're just calling it founder mode. So where do you sort of sit on that, like on the approach of, I mean, again, I understanding the caveat that every company is going to be unique and every company is going to be different, but which style do you lean more towards?
It's a really interesting debate. I definitely lean more towards founder mode,
Sure.
or I'd like to call it hyperactivity.
Sure.
I always want to be in the action, hearing what's going on, making as informed of a decision as I possibly can, and that leads to quick decisions sometimes that maybe don't have all the data and analysis and planning that should go behind it. And I think Mike operates that way as well.
Yeah.
And to your point on having kind of a more managerial number two or someone, I think Chris Sluty in our department kind of pulls Mike back from that, and being a co-founder, and that's a great balance between the two of them as co-founders. So I think you need that person who's going to be founder mode, driving things forward, being fast, taking intuition, getting into the details, micromanaging of sorts, and balancing them with the other. No successful organization is going to have just a million founder modes going out and doing it. So you need that balance between a couple of people.
I think what you said about intuition is a key element to this, because a lot of the critique of founder mode is that they eventually fail because they're not able to fully manage this large organization. But other people on the flip side say, well, there's a lot of the most successful companies use founder mode. And I think when it comes to this founder mode versus management mode mentality, the intuition of the founder is the reason the company was able to get successful to begin with. And it's a matter of still being able to listen to advice, but because a lot of founders will say, well, when I listened to advice from some mentor that said this is the business playbook of how to do this, they're like, that was the worst business decision we ever made. I should have just gone with my gut. But sometimes you feel like you've built this thing and now it's so big, you start to maybe question yourself of like, am I able to handle this? Like, I can handle it when it's a scrappy team of 25, 50 people. Yeah. But when it's a 1,000-person organization, do I trust myself to still be that person? And I like the idea of having that balance between somebody who's overseeing it more from a management style, but I think it's important for the founder, especially for companies that are built on that startup founder cultural mentality, to still stay involved with the people, because that's how you maintain that this is the organization that you created. Because it's very quick and very easy, I think, for over time to become disassociated with it. And next thing you know, it's not even your company really anymore. Right. It's just a thing that you've started and it's a thing you founded. But being the spokesperson for the company, being that face and the brand name, but also still being there on the ground floor and not micromanaging, but just being involved with knowing what's happening at the ground level, I think is just so important to maintain that culture.
Absolutely. And that's what Mike does. And I think that's what makes him so great at what he does and what he's built and what our vision is to build. But it's also the best founders you'll recognize those flaws in themselves or just the gaps that need to be filled. And that's why we bring in a new president and CRO of the company like Josh, who's done it before at a larger level, can come in and check the founder's intuition. Let Mike be Mike. Go do your founder mode. But now we're hearing what you're planning on doing, and you have that check with with someone who's done it before, who is going to enable you to be you, what's gotten us to this point, but also elevate you to the next level with what they know.
100%. So the key 4 pieces here, this was written by Paul Graham from the co-founder of Y Combinator, when he was introducing this concept of founder mode, was the founder mode versus manager mode, contrast, of course, being the hands-on and the day-to-day operations versus the delegation of tasks and saying, well, I've hired good people, I just trust them to go do the thing, which you do need to do, of course, but that doesn't mean I think you completely remove yourself from the situation. The importance of direct involvement, of course, which is related to that, as how much is just being relayed to managers to then go do it versus how much, which is why I feel like the all hands meetings are always so valuable. You're hearing a very transparent report from the top down, making sure everybody's on the same page. These are our numbers. These are our metrics. This is what we're looking to accomplish. This is our vision. Just a very important thing. And it's not lofty. It's very tactical. And then the challenge, of course, is the scaling. Is you can't be involved in everything at the smallest detail. So you should be aware of everything, but your level of involvement, I think, varies and it alters, of course, over time. And there has been industry endorsement from, the Airbnb's Brian Chesky or Shopify's Tobias Lutke, who supported Graham's argument, noting that the founder-driven leadership has been, critical to their own success. And I think at the end of the day, it just comes down to, if you have a good founder mode works.
Yeah.
And if you have a toxic founder, then it's not going to work. And then you have Elon Musk who's leaning over your shoulder, watching you code to make sure that you're doing your job, which is kind of creepy, versus somebody who's just more inspirational and keeping everybody going. And both companies can find success, but the ones that are the critical founder modes are the ones who are just being the micromanagers who are getting in your way. And the success ones are the ones who are leading the business in the right direction.
Yeah, if you can be looped in with Airbnb, Apple, OpenAI, you're in good territory.
Yeah, it also depends, I think, too, on how people want to be managed. Because some people want the hands-on, and some people are just, let me be autonomous, let me go do my thing.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to know what they're getting into.
Yeah.
A lot of the different leaders that we've hired over the years have asked me a question, knowing that I have insider knowledge, having worked with the founders for so long, as to, what's Mike like? Right. What's his style like? So I'm transparent as to what I've seen working with Mike and working closely with him for so many years, so that they know that, the type of founder mode that they're getting into.
Yeah. Communicating that just and putting it out there, I think, is such an important thing. And that's why even when I will lead a team meeting, I try to make sure, when we first assemble the team, when somebody new gets hired, it's discussing what's your preferred communication style? Are you a Slack person, an email person, a text person? What's off limits? What's on limits? You like getting phone calls? Would you rather get a text message? If you get a text on the weekend, does it, is that scary, or is it okay? And all of us have different approaches to what are reasonable it is. So understanding what it is that employees are looking for, definitely key. So I like to finish things up by laughing a little bit. The section called Make Meme Lol. I picked this piece here from Work, Retire, Die, which I thought was a funny little tweet that they had put out. It's the 5 benefits of a 4-day work week. And these read, number 1, 1 less day of work. Number 2, only 4 days of work. Number 3, the amount of days you need to work is less. Number 4, as opposed to 5 days of work, it's 4. And number 5, you don't have to work that 5th day.
All accurate.
What's Europe, as I think, toyed around with the notion of, we're all toying around with it, and some countries I think are actually implementing it.
Yeah.
What's the vibe check over there as far as cultural feelings around that 4-day work week movement?
I think there's been some testing that's gone on with it. I don't know exactly where it's at. I would love a 4-day work week. I love to travel.
Yeah.
Would love to be able to go somewhere in Europe every weekend with a 3-day weekend. I don't know how realistic it is. It has to depend on the individual, because the individual capacity for each employee is different, and people will end up doing their 5-day work week over 7. People will work over the weekends because they're not working at optimal efficiency in the 5 days that they have, where they don't have enough time based on the week. Alternatively, there's people who want to work as hard as they can, as fast as they can, as efficient as possible, and can do it all in 4 days, and don't need that 5th day. So I think it's more on the individual person. And since it is more on the individual person, I don't think you're going to have a mass movement that gets it right for everyone.
Yeah, I think the individualization of it is going to be the only way that it can possibly work. I guess a company could decide as a company, this is what our policy is. I don't think government rolling out a standard in the US, that would never work, because every company is going to have their own rules anyway. I could see it in Europe, perhaps, and correct me if I'm wrong, where if the government says, no, we're doing 4 day, and everybody's like, all right, we're doing 4 day, because they feel like there's a little more, there's less resistance to that sort of thing.
Is, yeah.
Here, everybody would be like, no, our company still is, we work 6 days, and too bad, and whatever. You don't want to give us your subsidy, then don't give us your subsidy or your tax credit or whatever it is that you're looking at. But I'm a big fan of this notion of like flexible work schedules in which you just build the one that works best for you. I am the type of person that doesn't mind working on the weekend. If I'm not doing anything on a Saturday, I'm not just going to sit on the couch and do nothing. I'd rather do something productive.
Right.
And even to the point of flexible work hours, because I hate traffic, so I would rather come in after traffic dies down and leave after traffic has died down.
Yep.
And make that be the schedule, and you kind of can work it for your way. And some people may prefer, you talk about wanting to travel, like if it was up to me, then maybe I work Thursday to Tuesday, and then I have Wednesday or Thursday to Monday, and then I have Tuesday, Wednesday off, because Tuesday and Wednesday are the easiest days the cheapest flights. And there's the least people on the road and or wherever you want to go. So you can go explore some new region, and you don't have to worry about, overpopulation. Because the worst thing is if everybody had Friday off, now everybody's running to the airport on Friday, it's just going to be a miserable experience. I'm like, I'm not even going to bother going.
Yeah. And again, those things all depend on the company and the individual. Because if you're in sales, you need to be going when the company you're trying to sell to is working, to be in touch, to work their hours.
It would be really interesting to see how sales would be impacted by that, because you do then have to adopt, like you'd have certain employees who are like, well, these companies and these people, that's another piece that you'd add, I guess, to your Salesforce thing is like, this person is the point of contact. What are their operating hours?
Work Sundays.
Yeah, work Sundays. And then you'd be like, all right, I guess I'm a Sunday worker now, because I'm going to be the Sunday worker. So your whole entire list of contacts are all the people that work on Sundays, because that's who you'd be reaching out to.
I mean, that's a good... We have had to adapt to that. We sell to Israel from the UK being much closer, and Israel work week starts on Sunday. So you have calls with companies all the time on Sundays, or schedule your emails to go out on Sundays, things like that. So you have to adapt to whoever you're selling to.
That's really interesting. Very cool. But I think we hit a lot of great points today. It was great having you. I think a lot of insight, I feel like, for folks who are just curious about the dynamic of the difference of what it's like to expand overseas and build, entities from the ground up, and just even the differences and the nuances from talking about scheduling and how that applies to stuff you actually are dealing with from, selling to multiple different countries and how there's different cultural differences. So to close things out here in the concluding cycle, I always try to get a unique perspective, I think, from the guest. And I felt suiting that there was this article that I saw came up with, I'm thinking of joining an early stage startup as the first sales exec. How do I pick right? And I was like, oh, this is kind of pretty perfect here. How do you do your own due diligence as that first person? It's likely too early to judge it based on revenue or Google search. So this is kind of like one of those career advice approaches. What went through your mind initially? And you touched on a little bit of how you called some people up, but what was going through your mind? Because most accountants are not taking that leap. Some people are definitely more ambitious, but there's some flexibility in your young 20s, but also there's still that overall fear of I don't want to fall behind. And what kind of went through your mind and attitude and mentality does it take for someone considering making that leap?
I would do it differently now. I was naive at the time. How I got in touch with FloQast, though, was through the tech incubator that FloQast came out of. So FloQast was in Amplify, LA, out of Venice Beach. I had gotten in touch with them, trying to understand just the local tech scene. So that's one way, is understanding the incubator that they came out of, the success from some of those other companies that have graduated from those incubators. If you can see, they now have that great baseline to build off of. That's an example. I'd definitely look at the investors. If you can see who the early investors are, if they have investors already, and what their success has looked like over time, that's going to be a major piece. But we talked a lot about founder mode, intuition, and entrepreneurship. At the end of the day, you just have to trust your gut and intuition in the people. And it's far less the company or the product that you're looking at. I think a lot of people think that I joined FloQast because it was an accounting software company and I had an audit background. It's not the case. I had decided I wanted to go work for a software company. I didn't care that it was in accounting or finance, but I met the people and the founders and one of the early employees. I said, I believe in these people and figuring it out and making a big impact on what they're doing. So that's where I put my bet on.
So you trusted the gut.
I trusted the gut, trust the intuition.
Love that. Well, I think that's a perfect way to wrap it up. It's been great having you, Adam Zoucha, here at our temporary podcast studio for just a little bit longer till we got our full one set up. So
yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being part. This has been the FinTech Flo. Thanks for checking out the FinTech Flo. As a reminder, this episode is available for CPE credit, and you can get that at FloAcademy or on the Earmark app. Details are in the description below.